A stark meditation on identity, or perhaps lack thereof. A meditation maybe on worth slash self-worth, or worthlessness slash self-worthlessness. All of these things are available when we journey into the mind of Emily Dickinson. Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for another poetry discussion. This time on Emily Dickinson's I'm Nobody. Who are you? This video will appear in 3 separate playlists here on the channel. Number 1 being the poetry discussion playlist, now nearing 700 videos strong. Number 2 being the Emily Dickinson playlist, a playlist dedicated to the greatest poet there ever was. I will hear no arguments. And number 3 being 30 must-read poems. Each of the 30 must-read poems videos has 3 different sections. Number 1 being a biography, a quick biography on the writer in question. Number 2 being a brief summary of the types of things that writer writes. And number 3 being an analysis of the poem itself. So, who was Emily Dickinson? Emily Elizabeth Dickinson, the reclusive and enigmatic poet, was born December 10, 1830, in Amherst, Massachusetts. For reference, this was the same year that the Church of Latter-day Saints was born and King George IV died. Ironically, in contrast with Emily's misanthropic propensities, her family was distinguished in the community. Notably, her father, Edward, was a lawyer and a trustee at Amherst College, a college her grandfather, Samuel, had had a hand in founding. But if her family name and her father loomed large in the community, Edward was inescapable in her life. Of her father, Emily said, "His heart was pure and terrible, and I think no other like it exists." Still, she respected him, even if her literary and intellectual proclivities were pursued in rebellion. If her father ran hot, it seems it was something she could understand, if not admire. Her relationship with her mother was colder. Emily Norcross Dickinson was said to be melancholic, and might today be described as depressive. Of her mother, Emily said, "She was an awful mother, but I liked her better than none." Far from a 5-star review, but we can recognize the signatures of both temperatures in her poetry. At 17 years old, Emily began attending Mary Lyons Mount Holyoke Female Seminary. She would attend the seminary all the way until May of the next year. The reasons for her leaving depend on who is relaying them. Whatever the reasons, like many geniuses, she did not finish her foray into post-secondary education. Shortly thereafter, Dickinson's relationship with Susan Gilbert would blossom and be further solidified in 1853 when Gilbert was engaged to Austin Dickinson, Emily's brother. Susan would then become Susan Gilbert Dickinson in 1856. During this same decade, Emily would embark on an introspective odyssey that would transform American letters and poetry altogether. The years from 1858 to 1865 are referred to as the writing years by Dickinson scholars. During this period, she wrote hundreds of poems, and by the end of this period, she had written over 1,100 of her 1,789 known poems. But she would end this period in her cousin's care after receiving treatment for what is now believed to have been iritis, an inflammation of the muscles in her eyes. If the humanitarian burden of writing 1,000 of the greatest poems to ever exist was not toilsome enough to cause her complete withdrawal, loss would be. Part of her instructions in order that she would keep her eyesight was that she had to stop reading. Emily Dickinson also struggled mightily to deal with death, and losing people who were important to her devastated her more each time it happened. During this period, she had remarked that before she could recover from one loss, she had lost someone else. And with hundreds of the greatest poems to ever be written still inside her mind, Emily Dickinson became the woman in white, dressing completely in white, never leaving her family's property, and even preferring to speak to people through the closed door to her bedroom. Emily Dickinson would publish only 10 poems during her lifetime. All of them were published without attribution. On May 15th, 1886, Emily Dickinson died after more than 2 years of battling what was known as Bright's disease, a type of kidney disease. Her final words were, "I must go in. The fog is rising." And in order to begin properly, it's important to start with the question, what kind of poetry did Emily Dickinson write? Well, Emily Dickinson was rare even amongst geniuses. And as is often the case with the uncommon amongst uncommon people, there is no way to pinpoint her, though her poetry is often described as lyric, romantic, and transcendental. So what do these words mean? Lyric poetry refers to a short poem, often with song-like qualities, that expresses the speaker's personal emotions and feelings. Historically intended to be sung and accompany musical instrumentation, lyric now describes a broad category of non-narrative poetry, including elegies, odes, and sonnets. Romantic poetry is a poetic movement of the late 18th and early 19th centuries that turned toward nature and the interior world of feeling in opposition to the mannered formalism and disciplined scientific inquiry of the Enlightenment era that preceded it. English poets such as William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, John Keats, Percy Bysshe Shelley, William Blake, and Lord Byron produced work that expressed spontaneous feelings, found parallels to their own emotional lives in the natural world, and celebrated creativity rather than logic. And finally, transcendentalism. Transcendentalism is an American literary, philosophical, religious, and political movement of the early 19th century centered around Ralph Waldo Emerson. Other important transcendentalists were Henry David Thoreau, Margaret Fuller, Lydia Marie Child, Amos Bronson Alcott, Frederick Henry Hedge, Elizabeth Palmer Peabody, and Theodore Parker. Stimulated by English and German Romanticism, the biblical criticism of Herder and Schleiermacher, and the skepticism of Hume, the Transcendentalists operated with the sense that a new era was at hand. They were critics of their contemporary society for its unthinking conformity, and urged that each person find in Emerson's words, quote, an original relation to the universe, end quote. Emerson and Thoreau sought this relation in solitude amidst nature and in their writing. By the 1840s, they, along with other transcendentalists, were engaged in the social experiments of Brook Farm, Fruitlands, and Walden, and by the 1850s, an increasingly urgent critique of American slavery. I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you Nobody too? Then there's a pair of us. Don't tell. They'd banish us, you know. How dreary to be somebody. How public, like a frog. To tell your name the livelong June to an admiring bog. So this has been one of my favorite poems for a very, very long time, and I think so this will not be a an explanation of why, because this is the first time that I've noticed something different about this poem, the way that this poem makes a proclamation and then eventually uh, casts out, perhaps, uh, one of the biggest insults, perhaps, ever. And the reason that this poem speaks to a lot of people, I think, is because of that opening line there, I'm nobody, who are you? I think that many of us feel this way a lot. Many of us have been in this place, that feeling of nobodiness, that feeling of abject worthlessness, perhaps. Being nobody means something very, very strong. I'm nobody, who are you? This saying, hey, even though I'm nobody, even though I am a nothing, um, I am reaching out. And are you nobody too? Then there's a pair of us. This suggesting that both the speaker and the reader here are nobody, and that maybe there is community available in that. Don't tell. They'd banish us, you know. The feeling of otherness, I think, is different than the feeling of nobodiness. The feeling of otherness, though it is other, I think does suggest that there is otherness to complement otherness, right? The other is not singular. Nobody is singular. I'm nobody. I'm no one. That is singular in its manifestation by the speaker here. I'm nobody. This is my identity. I am nobody. The speaker willing to say that in nobodiness we can still be other together is something that I don't think is really recognized in this poem. How dreary to be somebody. How public, like a frog. One of the quotes from Emily Dickinson that has sort of stood the tests of time is that publication is the auction of the mind of man. Emily Dickinson, famously, perhaps infamously, largely unpublished during her day. I believe it is true that all of her poems were published anonymously, the ones that were published while she was alive, which is to remain nameless, to remain nobody. This idea that publication is the auction of the mind of man. Publication would have been, to some extent, the pinnacle of what it was that Emily Dickinson loved, what it was that Emily Dickinson loved, being literature. So, what she's saying here, what the speaker is saying here, I should make that separation. What the speaker here is saying is that identity is dreary. The very act of standing out is dreary. I think this is to take her proclamation that publication is the auction of the mind of man one step higher. To suggest that any type of standing out, to suggest that any accomplishment in any field is the auction of the mind of man. Is she right? Is our speaker correct there? Now, the end of this poem is where This reading is standing out for me versus the years, the decades that I have been reading this poem. To tell your name the livelong June. Ribbit, ribbit, you know, a frog. You know the sound a frog makes. You've heard that sound during the summer months, probably. To tell one's name the livelong June. To go around saying, this is me, look at me, give me your attention. To tell your name the livelong June. To an admiring bog. So, boy, that's an insult on all of civilization, isn't it? All of community, isn't it? This poem then becomes something very different if you're willing to wait that last statement as heavily as the rest of the poem, as heavily certainly as the beginning of the poem, that opening statement. I'm nobody, who are you? Are you nobody too? Then there's a pair of us. Don't tell, they'd banish us, you know. This is saying that in our anonymity, in our nobodiness, in our otherness, to an extent, there is an identity. And that identity can only be a type of selflessness. Perhaps the same type of selflessness with which Emily Dickinson forged her work. Not caring about publication, caring solely about the truth, caring solely about the efficacy of the words themselves, not wanting to be known as Emily Dickinson, the great poet, wanting to be known, not wanting only the words to stand. How dreary to be somebody. How dreary to seek publication. How dreary to try for attention. How public, like a frog. The frog doesn't know that it's public, does it? The frog doesn't understand that when you're trying to sleep and you hear that damn frog croaking in the middle of the night, everyone just wishes it would shut up. That frog doesn't realize what it's doing, it just does. The way that someone seeking attention just does not realize perhaps they are attacks on the rest of us. To tell your name the livelong June, this is a furtherance of how public someone is. But that last line, to an admiring bog. To state, to have the audacity to state that all of civilization, all of community, the world in which we live is nothing more than a bog. Boy, that's rough. Boy, that's tough. What a wicked insult to the day-to-day that we all go through. But what it really does at the end of this poem is to say that, look, I might be nobody. In fact, I'll proclaim it. I'm nobody. But all of those people who are struggling so mightily, so heartily to be somebody, take a step back. All of those people, all that they're doing is struggling to be somebody in the bog. We all live in the swamp. Maybe I'm nobody, but you're only somebody to the bog. You're only somebody in this messy little place. So, I think what is happening in this poem is to suggest that the only real thing is the real thing. The objective correlative. No one really depends on what you say you are. Only what you do. Only what you can prove. This poem is to say that maybe you carve out some little niche for yourself in this world, but this world, well, maybe it's not all that much to look at. Is this a meditation by Emily Dickinson on the fact that there is some better plane than the plane on which we live? Is this the plane of ideas? Is this the plane of spirituality? Read enough Emily Dickinson and you will get a sense of not indifference to religiosity, but certainly difference from religiosity. I'm nobody, and you're somebody to this bog. You're somebody to the swamp. Are we really all that different except that the nobody does not try so hard to be a somebody? That is all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting a like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. There's poetry every Monday, and I hope to have you back for the next one.